Video games aren't fun anymore.
Yeah, they're so bad.
Man, I wonder why that is. I wonder why that is. I said, I wonder why that is. Gaming sucks, or at least in the year 2023, it feels like it does. With Redfall not being an actual game, Jedi Survivor's horrible PC port, The Last of Us having an unplayable PC port, Forspoken was bad, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet was just a buggy mess. Whoa, hey. The GTA remake trilogy.
Oh, the Saints Row remake.
Callisto Protocol.
Marvel's Avengers.
Atomic Heart.
Oh, Overwatch 2.
Gotham Knights.
Halo Infinite.
Battlefield 2042.
Cyberpunk 2077.
Diablo Immortal.
And Sonic Frontiers. It feels like the AAA industry is a shell of what it once was, and many of you might be feeling similar to us and wondering, how did we get here? Who is responsible? Well, if we want to understand that, we need to go back. Back.
Back, 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 back. When video games became more popular in the 70s, they were made by literal children using Play-Doh to make Space Invaders for an arcade cabinet. And luckily, since child labor is good, we didn't have to pay those children. So arcade games were very cheap to make and made a lot of money.
As games moved to consoles, no longer could companies fleece children in arcades, and instead charge full dollar price tags, allowing them to make more money without having to spend much more in development costs. But when Sonic went through puberty, Daddy Sega had to spend a lot more money for his little brat kid to get cool clothes and shoes, so all the kids at school would like him more. And that wasn't really good for Sega.
Whoa!
While Sega wasn't having a good time, Sony had entered the space and was getting all of the silly bands on the playground along with Nintendo.
It was at this point where large game development studio names came into focus, with what are now big names developing smash hits for the PlayStation system, like Naughty Dog, Konami, Square Enix, Insomniac Games, and 989 Studios. Most of these teams were around before the PlayStation, but this is where many of them made a big name for themselves, publishing great games like Crash Bandicoot, Metal Gear Solid, Spyro the Dragon, Twisted Metal, and like 24 Final Fantasy games.
When the move to the PlayStation 2 was made, these studios only continued to make more of a name for themselves. The only problem was, as consoles became more technologically advanced, the cost to develop a game was increasing exponentially. To develop a game for the original PlayStation took an estimated $800,000 to $1.7 million, while the PlayStation 2 took between $5 and $10 million, and that's in 2005 USD. Now, when games like Crash Bandicoot are raking in an estimated $300 million, that may not seem like a big deal, but it was reported in 2005 that as few as 80 games a year will turn a profit. With 400 plus games releasing in the year 2005, that means as little as 20% of games were profitable.
So, putting this into a little more historical context, we can see that it was becoming increasingly more important for games to generate revenue to stay profitable. At a time when game developers were already taking notes from each other on how to create new and engaging experiences and also push the hardware of each console to its absolute limit, it's not surprising that publishers were now looking for other ways to generate revenue. The role of the publisher in game development has become increasingly important as development costs have risen. When games can cost in the millions to produce, someone has to front the cost of development so a game can be released to start generating revenue. This is where publishers fit into the picture.
Publishers, in theory, should be a positive thing. They can enable games to get made that otherwise wouldn't be possible. However, since they are the ones putting up capital for production, it means that publishers get quite a bit of say in how games can be developed and released. If you don't believe publishers are important, look at Game Freak, a company that was bordering on bankruptcy while developing Pokemon. And that was after they had already partnered with Nintendo to publish the game. They almost went bankrupt with the publisher's support. So without a publisher, Pokemon never would have existed. So, publishers can be good, but their financial backing allows them to significantly control the development of a game. Just look at Dead Space 3, which was a complete departure from the first two games. This occurred in large part due to EA wanting the game to be more marketable. While Dead Space 2 outsold Dead Space 1, EA was still not happy with how many copies it sold. In an effort to make the game more marketable, the third game was dumbed down to a more actiony game with microtransactions added. And EA was already planning further sequels that would have been more broadly appealing, including an Uncharted-like game. There was an interview with then creative director Ben Whammy that came out in 2017 where Dead Space fans would come to know that the third installment originally had deep systems of psychological horror that were ultimately cut to push sales for the less survival horror-y version of the game that ultimately hit shelves.
This is one of many examples of publishers sticking their grubby little hands into the game development pie in an attempt to just milk a game for as much money as they can. And honestly, I don't want to talk about this any further because we can make a whole other video on this at a later point in time. More about that in another video, so make sure to subscribe for more. In line with trying to eke out more money, publishers also started to take note of the emergence of the lucrative mobile game market. Releasing in 2008, the iOS App Store was a smash success, with 10 million downloads in 3 days and 1 billion downloads in under a year. Apple had accidentally uncovered what would become the largest media market in the world. And just over 1 year after the release of the App Store, they would release the single reason why mobile games now dominate the gaming market: in-app purchase.
These together in 2009 generated over $4 billion for Apple. We won't go too in-depth on how mobile game monetization bled into the console and PC game market, as there's an incredible video by Josh Strife Hayes that does an excellent job covering this topic. Suffice to say, a lot of gamers have been affected by the shockwaves of the mobile games industry.
I just couldn't stop opening the cases, man. I would spend like $100 in a night just to try and get a rare knife. And when I wasn't winning enough, I went to skin gambling and the roulettes.
Man, that sounds rough, but imagine paying full price for a Call of Duty Vanguard just to have to pay for all the sweet cosmetics. I had this really cool King Kong suit that I wanted to get, but it was $24, so I grinded like 4 seasons worth of battle passes just to have enough COD points, because you know they have some extra ones. I just wanted the King Kong suit so I could go monkey.
Let me stop you right there, buddy, because I need to talk about today's sponsor, Genshin Impact. Download Genshin Impact with the link in the description and use the bonus code Shapiro for a free 60 Supremo gems. And
dude, are you serious? We're in an AA meeting for this gotcha bullshit and you're gonna run an ad read right in front of us?
Of course, because with this limited offer, you can download the game and use code. Welcome to the White Plane Integrated Sliding Scale.
White piss for short.
This is where we come to discuss the monetization of video games. Let's start out by setting up our boundaries. On this side, we have games that are created more for the love and passion of making the art. The most extreme examples are games that are free, insightful, unique, free, and enjoyed by many for their degrees of complexity. Oh, and did I mention that they're free?
Our premier example of such a game is Doki Doki Literature Club. As with all visual novel dating sims, it provides its audience the video game equivalent of a charcuterie board, with many decadent ingredients to choose from, to result in a game that is far greater than the sum of its parts. In the case of DDLC, we have only the finest brie, the most excellent prosciutto, and man, I can't do this analogy. Like, I get the connection here, and this game is about high schoolers, so I'm uncomfortable. Anyway, the game is fucking good. It is a deep story, well-written characters, and divergent gameplay. I don't want to spoil any of it, so that is as much as I'll say. If you haven't played DDLC, go fucking play it. It's free. That's why it's on this end of the scale. It's insane that this game is free. I would easily pay $20+ for this masterpiece. Wow, Caleb, that's super insightful and sounds like such a cool game. Too bad its revenue-generating potential is absolutely wasted by just giving it away. Let me show you the kind of game that can really earn you a quick
No,
buck.
we don't want to go.
No, wait, stop! God! Fuck! I introduced to you FIFA 2023, specifically for the Nintendo Switch. This game effectively took 2 hours of development time. We just recycled FIFA 2018, updated the rosters, sold it at full price, and continue to earn billions of dollars in revenue from Ultimate Team. It truly is the pinnacle of financial success in the gaming industry.
So basically, the extremes of this scale are examples of games that are made as an artistic endeavor and games that are made as a financial endeavor, with most of the games folks play landing somewhere in the middle. So for example, a title like Breath of the Wild would land here, because it was certainly made with a passion for creation, but it's still a $60 game that was intended to sell consoles on release, indicating that there was a profit motive behind it.
So wait a minute, with Breath of the Wild being right here, that implies that it's somewhere in between DDLC and FIFA, when really I would consider it closer to DDLC in terms of quality and artistry. FIFA is just a money grab, but you can tell that Breath of the Wild really was given time to develop into something beautiful. So therefore, I suggest we add another axis to the scale, the Cartesian unilateral measurement.
Oh, the COM! I haven't had to think about that since business school in '09.
Yeah, so the addition of COM allows us to not only look at games for how they are monetized, but also for how they are carefully crafted as wonderful pieces of art. See, in this case, Breath of the Wild ends up all the way up here, because there are no in-game purchases and it is fleshed out DLC. A game like God of War Ragnarok would end up right around here as well.
The ultimate point of this scale is to showcase that while some recent titles fall into the unsavory sections of this chart, there are still large segments of the industry releasing games for the love and passion of it. The graph is ultimately supposed to help you decide where your tolerances exist, with the added note that there are not necessarily any bad choices. If you like playing first-person shooters and don't mind some cosmetic monetization and battle passes, the Call of Duty franchise could be perfectly fun for you and your friends.
Okay, bootlicker, we can see a ton of games end up in this area. And it's fine if you want to play the latest COD. Shit, I have 1,000 hours in Overwatch. But I would like to take some time to highlight some of these other quadrants for those of us who would actually like to enjoy games for once instead of playing live service games.
Wow, I did not realize how small we were down here.
Yeah, but not as small as the dignity of the developers down here in our low artistry and high monetization quadrant. As you can see, this is mostly dominated by free-to-play games with aggressive monetization platforms, such as the battle passes and shops of Overwatch 2 and Apex Legends, or the case gacha system of Counter-Strike Global Offensive. It also includes games like Redfall, the GTA trilogy, and the new Saints Row reboot, which are all games that are full price but completely disastrous and incomplete when it comes to their release. Redfall is one of the most empty games I've seen in a while. There's a reason that it had fewer players than Borderlands 2, an 11-year-old game, only 3 days after launch. This might be a controversial statement, but I would not call you crazy if you deemed all games in this category mostly devoid of inspiration or creativity based on their monetization scheme alone. And this is coming from someone with probably close to 3,500 hours across Overwatch, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and Apex Legends.
Over here, in the low monetization, low artistry quadrant, we've got games that are cheap or free without egregious monetization systems that are not aiming for a deep level of creative expression. Many of these games are tight experiences that are focused on doing one thing very well. You'll also see a lot of emerging developers trying their hand at creating a game for the first time. I think you can make the argument that a lot of game jam games and indie horror titles would end up here too. This is an inoffensive section. It's a low-risk experience for consumers to hop in and try, and there are plenty of multiplayer competitive games that live here, so it often doesn't demand a lot of analysis or thought to understand what the game is trying to communicate to its players.
Moving up to the indie darling zone. We have games that are so good they are unfairly priced, but in the opposite way of what you're thinking. These are games that prove that video games can be art. They remind us it's possible to communicate complicated themes and emotions to players even after 2 decades of Call of Duty games rehashing the same formula. Just about every game in this quadrant has me walking away with emotional impact that sticks with me for days. I feel a little hint of it whenever I think about that game. These experiences deserve to be cherished, and god damn it, I would give anything to be able to experience the horror of DDLC, or the curiosity of Inscription, or even the stellar progression of Deep Rock Galactic for the first time again.
The best way to identify these games is their ability to clog your backlog and the constant harassment of friends telling you, you need to play this.
Play Undertale already, you disgusting swine!
Shut the fuck up! Anyway, these are games where, for the amount of content and the quality of the experience, you feel like you're almost robbing the developer by getting to play their game for often less than $30. So that just happened. So that just happened. So that just happened. That just happened. So that just happened. So that just happened. So that just happened. Anyway, here's our final quadrant. This is the side of the gaming industry that gives you the hope that the first quadrant we talk about crushes beneath its grubby, gritty little peaks. This is where some of our aggressively monetized friends that are still technically impressive and fun games end up, as well as the AAA studs that you beg mommy to get you for Christmas from fan favorite studios like Rockstar and Bethesda. Now, I understand it might be a little controversial to put Red Dead Redemption 2 and Valorant so close together, but understand that at the end of the day, these are both high quality experience. One is just a tad more aggressively monetized than the other, and they do serve different purposes.
This is also a good time to recognize that there's a lot of technical artistry that goes into free-to-play titles. These games have to be accessible to as large of an audience as possible, meaning they have to be super optimized to run on even the most potato of machines. Just as someone could argue that Valorant doesn't have a lot of artistry from a story or even gameplay perspective, you could counter that the technical ability of the teams to create and maintain a game like that is in and of itself an art. It's why games that are generally considered only okay, such as Halo Infinite, don't fall into this category. They're incomplete to some extent, and the prioritization of getting out a cash shop instead of content is in and of itself an anti-consumer act.
Even a game like Fortnite has an admirable level of artistry. The visual style of the game is incredibly consistent considering the level of collaborators they have. The content they push out is not only revolutionary in many aspects, but diverse enough to keep people coming back season after season of what is pretty much the same base game from 2017. Not to mention, they popularized the Battle Pass monetization format, which someone with a marketing degree like me can't help but admire.
Hey man, you should put your dick back in your pants. There are children here, you know, the ones that Epic are exploiting for profit.
Speaking of children, I feel like there's a game that we're missing from this category, but I can't quite put my finger on it.
Oh my god.
Fuck. So just to be clear, since Genshin players are notorious for being very against any sort of criticism of their game, I have nothing against people that enjoy Genshin. I think it's entirely possible to enjoy a game like Genshin responsibly, and the whole reason Genshin is in this section and not the section of other predatory games is because Genshin does have genuine artistry behind it.
To be equally as clear, every criticism I leverage against Genshin Impact should be taken as a personal assault on anyone who enjoys the game, calls themselves a fan, and logs in every day, letting the game shape their life and their routines. If you take issue with this, I prefer to handle this argument in person through physical violence. You can find me at latitude 40.4362200900741, longitude -109.568154028649008.
Dude, what the fuck? Why would you? Wow, look at how beautiful Genshin Impact is. It's so breathtaking and wild.
It sure is, Caleb, and the characters and story are deep, dynamic, and grippy, just like all of the microtransactions.
Ooh, look at that character! As someone who has played plenty of gachas in their time, looking through Genshin Impact as someone who hasn't really played it, honestly, it's nothing special. I've seen plenty of other gachas with worse storefronts, more aggressive player hook techniques, and other ways to get you to link your credit card up to the game as quick as possible. The one thing Genshin has over all those other gachas is it's an actually engaging and interesting game. The art, the music, the overall quality of Genshin is far above your Raid Shadow Legends, AFK Arenas, or Idol Huntresses. But don't get it twisted, you will lose. At the end of the day, even if you make a Breath of the Wild clone and add cheap rock, paper, scissors mechanics over it, a gacha is still a gacha. And anyone I know who has put any considerable amount of time into this game still comes back to it because of the predatory habit-building mechanics it has, such as limited time events, login rewards, mission resets, and any other standard way to keep people hooked on that next dopamine hit from their latest tentpole. Now, to be clear, I have nothing against the people that play Genshin, as they are victims. I have even considered getting into the game periodically. The issue here is that the revenue-generating techniques of Genshin are manipulative and predatory. They string you along for tens of hours, get you invested, and only then start to show the dark underbelly of the game. the highs are incredibly high. Hitting that 5-star, triple S, super omega pull is literally better than sex. But that only lasts long enough to get you hard for the next 10 pull with the hope of another waifu. What you forget about in that process is the insane grind it takes to even get to that 10 pull, the 20 missions, the 30 days of logging in, all of the gems you store up for that limited event. What Genshin does in a very insidious way is it converts your currency. It converts your money to crystals to gems to fates. But it also does more than that. Along the way, it converts your time too. Unless you're whaling, you are spending heavily with your time, just with the hope of that next dopamine rush. That obfuscation of the true cost of each 10 pull is what allows players to keep going. Because if you can't see a clear breakdown of what you spent to get to the point of a really new big character hit, you'll never really understand the time and or money that went into getting that shiny waifu. These are techniques that casinos use. The reason you get chips or tokens or tickets is because as humans, we don't see spending 10 tokens at Chuck E. Cheese as what it really is. It's spending $5 to play a game. Whether you're spending $300 or 300 hours, it's all dollars in MiHoYo's bank account. From one act to another, Genshin players, please get help.
Genshin Impact may have horrible and predatory monetization practices, but at least its positioning as a mobile game lets players know what they're getting themselves into. The AAA industry, however, proves to only be interested in innovating the ways they can deceive their audiences. I'm going to talk about Cyberpunk. Please forgive me if I embellish a bit here, as my marketing degree makes me particularly adept at sniffing out corporate bullshit. I literally received a formal education in lying. Also, I originally wrote nearly 1,000 words on this piece, so you're getting the abridged version here. I find Cyberpunk to be a fascinating case study. They had what is considered by many to be one of the worst game launches in history. Yet, by all measurable accounts, the game was a smash hit. It received critical acclaim, more on that in another video, and earned CD Projekt Red over $1 billion in revenue in 2020, earning the company a valuation of over $8 billion. No amount of class action lawsuits, removal from console marketplaces, or YouTube video essays can convince them that they did something wrong. When you're making that kind of cash, this sort of stuff can easily be written off as the cost of doing business. The launch of Cyberpunk signaled to the AAA industry that they could sell single-player, story-driven experiences with the lucrative games-as-a-service model. However, instead of earning more revenue by creating cheap-to-make cosmetics and flipping them with an outrageously marked-up price, studios could instead save costs by crunching their staff to rush the game out before it's ready, which I'd like to note decreases the wages per hour the studio has to pay their staff by making them work unacceptably long shifts for not much more pay. Plus, if they're salaried, they're just getting free labor off of that. Then, they can use their pre-order and early sales cycle revenue to justify further investment to fix the game. From there, they position this as a remedy tour to their audiences and work to shift the narrative around their studio to focus on their dedication to their title and their fans, feeding into a story that they're pro-consumer by not giving up on their game. No matter how much they want you to believe that they stuck with their game through every hardship, CDPR knew the state of Cyberpunk at launch and yet didn't offer a roadmap to fix it until the sales numbers proved it was worth their time and resources. It's important to recognize that this is a strategic marketing tactic. Their ability to get the game to an acceptable state months after launch and serve up a flashy anime that could be more accurately described as a 10-episode advertisement does not make up for their scorched earth marketing approach. This sort of thing doesn't happen in the software as a service industry. It would be the equivalent to you buying a year-long subscription to Spotify and them not putting music on the platform until 6 months after they launch the app. Considering that video games face relatively little competition during their launch window, publishers are in a unique position to abuse their fans. There were no alternatives to Cyberpunk on release. If you wanted to play an open-world RPG, it was your only fresh option. This sneaky games-as-a-service model ruins the trust consumers have in the industry and exploits and burns out the developers with crunch conditions. However, it often results in very little backlash for studio heads or the publisher. I believe that Cyberpunk's success proved to the industry that they could get away with this sort of thing way more blatantly than they ever thought possible. Take a look at Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, which, despite a rocky launch, is now considered one of the greatest takes on the franchise. Game Freak just isn't incentivized to make their games better. Unfortunately, not buying the game results in punishment for the consumers as well. Take the GTA Remake trilogy, for example, whose lack of sales earnings resulted in the game remaining incomplete and Rockstar canceling other planned remakes such as Red Dead 1. With this type of approach to making games more profitable, it's easy to see why so many gamers feel their hobby is a shell of what it used to be.
Whoa, man, that was a lot of marketing talk. I think it's time for
Oh shit. Ultimately, the feeling that many gamers have that their hobby isn't as fun as it used to be is valid. The amount of cash that's entered the market has spoiled what should be treated as an interactive iteration on art and expression. The industry isn't totally saturated with horrible unfinished titles, and we believe the Come is a perfect way to see that there's still plenty of games being made that are innovative, entertaining, and well worth your time. The indie scene represents an exciting counterculture that rejects the profit motive behind gaming and instead focuses on the reason we all came to love this hobby in the first place. Gaming should be fun. It's difficult for some of these titles to get the recognition they deserve, so we'll link to some excellent YouTube channels that provide extensive coverage on the industry. Be sure to check them out and go enjoy gaming again. Wait, where did Caleb go? Who put this pit here? Oh. Uh-oh.